Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here and welcome to Code Vein. If you guys saw my Dragon Ball FighterZ video that I uploaded on Friday, then you'll know that I had the chance to visit Bandai Namco's UK offices last week. And while I was there, not only did I get a chance to go hands-on with Dragon Ball again, but I also got to try out Code Vein for the very first time. The gameplay you're seeing in this video is from the TGS build of the game, the first build that was publicly playable. Obviously this time it's in English, and while it is still a work in progress and a lot of stuff is still being fine-tuned and optimized, it gave me a good opportunity to really see what the game had to offer, and I've got to say, my initial impressions are good. Really good. For those of you that perhaps haven't heard of this before, then Code Vein is a game that shares a lot of similarities with Dark Souls and Bloodborne, so much so that it's quite often referred to in games media as the anime Dark Souls. And while that's not exactly a bad thing, I mean the Dark Souls games are amazing, and I for one am all for another challenge that fits into the Soulsborne space, it's also important to stress that while there are obvious similarities and comparisons that can be drawn, Code Vein also has its own identity and its own ideas that make it more than just another Dark Souls clone. So, with that in mind, I thought I'd put together a video to talk a bit more about the game and give you 5 reasons that Code Vein should be on your radar for next year. If you do enjoy this video, then a like would be super appreciated, and be sure to comment down below and let me know what you guys think. Is this a game that you are looking forward to yourself? Are you a fan of any of these Soulsborne games? Definitely let me know. Now, kicking things off at number 1. Quite simply, if you like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, you're going to like Code Vein. Let's get the obvious comparisons out of the way to begin with. First up, the general gameplay flow follows the Dark Souls formula. You roam around dungeons, battling enemies, and upon killing them, you collect your experience, which is a resource akin to that of souls. And that resource is then lost upon death. If you do die, and believe me, you will, a lot, then you can return to your body or the location you died to reclaim your experience. This is very important to do since this is the currency that you'll use to upgrade your abilities, make yourself stronger, back at checkpoints, aka the bonfire. Visiting a checkpoint replenishes your health potions and blood charges, but also resets the enemies, so the gameplay will follow the usual balance of going around, farming enemies, juggling your upgrades, whilst also navigating your way through the labyrinth-like dungeons, looking for shortcuts that make your return journey easier and quicker, and ideally checkpoints further along to save you making the long trek back every time you want to stop for upgrades or any time you die. Finally, when you get to the end, you'll face off against a big bad boss who again will likely kill you many times. But when you ultimately come out on top, you then move on to the next area. So yes, as mentioned, the formula is similar, but Code Vein doesn't try to hide this fact. On the contrary, the game director, Hiroshi Yoshimura, someone you may know for his work on the God Eater franchise, embarked on this project to do just that, to create his own spin on the Souls franchise. And what's nice about his involvement in this project and the visual style of the game is that he's been able to work some of that over-the-top combat flair into it, the sorts of stuff that you would expect from A, an anime, and B, God Eater. And this ultimately results in some truly awesome gameplay moments. I'll speak a little bit more in depth about combat later in this video, but the core gameplay just feels super solid. Enemy engagements will see you balancing your offensive and defensive abilities, attacking sparingly, trying not to be too greedy and ultimately ending up dead. You can block, parry and dodge, all whilst managing your stamina, which again, if you're a Dark Souls player, should come as no surprise to you. I'd say this probably falls quite nicely in between both Bloodborne and Dark Souls, with combat being a little more fast-paced and fluid than Dark Souls, but not quite as rapid as Bloodborne. So again, it stands up well alongside both. And if that's not enough to go on, then did I mention that you're going to die? A lot?
Next time. Next time. Next time. Damn it.
Moving on from there to number 2, as a sort of counter to my first point, if you don't like the Dark Souls games, then don't write off Code Vein just yet, because there might just be something for you. I appreciate the notion of brutal difficulty and the promise of boss fights that'll see you die over and over and over again until you either want to tear your hair out or throw your controller at the screen might not sound like everyone's idea of fun. And that's cool, I totally get that, and so too does Code Vein. So the game has a rather interesting AI companion system. You're not alone in this world, and while these companions won't complete the game for you or do all the work for you, they can make a big difference in battle. In the demo that I played, I only had the choice of one companion, this lady named Mia, but in the full game there will be quite a few to choose from, each of whom have their own unique fighting style and range of abilities, and they also have their own story missions too, so that you can build an attachment to them, as opposed to them just being a lifeless drone that follows you around. These companions will fight alongside you as you explore the world, and take on bosses, and in the case of Mia, she actually has an ability that can resurrect me should I go down in combat. Now to be clear, this doesn't suddenly make the game a walk in the park. On the contrary, there are still only a finite number of times you can rely on this, and also, her ability still needs to be cast, so if she's getting attacked by enemies and you do go down, I'm sorry, but you're still dead. Similarly, you can't just leave your companion to go off and kill everything for you, because the game is still designed to be challenging. But they are pretty responsive, helping you out when you need it, casting abilities at times that make sense, and more often than not, they're just super useful to take the heat off of you in battle. For any of you guys that play Monster Hunter and go on hunts with your Palico, you'll know only too well that really it's just there to give the monster something else to attack other than you, and that's the same here. Boss fights are brutal, and they will bombard you with unrelenting attacks given the opportunity, but having someone else in the field means that they will often cycle attacks between the both of you, giving you a little bit more time to breathe. So while you're still going to have a challenge ahead of you, I will say that the AI companion feature does at least make the game a little more accessible than the likes of, say, Dark Souls or Bloodborne. It is however worth calling out for the hardcore Soulsborne fans out there, these companions can be left behind if you do still want to go it alone. Next up, in at number 3, combat. Combat feels great. I mentioned earlier that the base combat flow shares similarities with your typical Dark Souls or Bloodborne flow. You have your light attacks, your heavy attacks, and your ability to parry, block, and dodge, all whilst monitoring your stamina. But on top of that, you also have a launcher attack, which can be used to either stun enemies, or if your focus meter is full, then this can actually be used to launch enemies into the air, opening up the opportunity to pull off a rather flashy and bloody finisher move that also generates blood charges in the process. See, on top of the basic combat abilities you have from your weapons, you also have access to a few other pretty cool abilities, and this is where Code Vein really starts to come into its own. First up, you have these abilities called gifts. These are the icons you see in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. These will vary from things like attack or defense boost, to healing abilities for you and your ally, or even a range of magic spells to get out of reach targets. All of these abilities use a resource known as blood charges, that number down here that ranges from 10 to 12. Blood charges are generated by attacking enemies and consumed when you use your abilities, or your gifts. So whilst exploring dungeons, you want to use them sparingly, and similarly in boss fights, you want to weigh up when it's most appropriate to use them, especially considering some of these do have cast times, so the last thing you want to do is be caught in the animation when the boss comes your way. However, on top of that, you also have blood veils. There are 3 that I'm aware of thus far: the Ogre, the Hound, and the Stinger. The demo that I played had the Ogre and the Stinger. The first one is a claw that you can charge up to perform a lunge attack, and if you strike the enemy, not only do you generate blood charges, but it also increases your total maximum charge capacity for a short time. The Stinger instead gave you this scorpion tail, which had longer reach than the Ogre, but also had a ridiculously long charge time. I was actually told that they were going to be shortening that charge time simply because it's a little too long as it exists right now, but either way, that is another option. The Hound, the one that I didn't get a chance to use, basically gives you 2 dog heads as pauldrons or shoulders, and they can then be used for similar results. Furthermore, the game also has a class system known as blood codes. There are different classes ranging from things like heavy, technical, balance, long distance, magic, buffs, etc. And while you will pick one of these at the beginning of the game, you can swap between them at checkpoints and level them up independently. Different classes or blood codes have different abilities, so the option to swap between them really allows you to tailor your abilities to upcoming encounters or bosses without the need to respec or incur any sort of penalty. So in summary, you have a solid basic combat flow that will form the crux of your battle strategy, but you then have a wide range of abilities or gifts to bolster your options. These gifts are then fueled by blood charges, which tie nicely into the blood veils, and all of this then wraps up nicely in the blood codes class system to provide you with yet more ways to play. However, moving on from there, still on a combat related note, in at number 4, Code Vein has a lot of cool weapons. They fall into one of 5 different categories, and during my playtime I had a chance to test out a few, plus found a couple more in chests. You can equip 2 weapons at one time and swap between them using the D-pad, and this is in addition to your chosen blood veil that I spoke about a moment ago. You have the one-handed sword, which is quick, and while it might not dish out as much damage as some of the heavier weapons, it is one of these safer choices since you don't have to commit quite as much to use it. There's also a giant 2-handed sword, much more powerful but also much slower, leaving you open a lot of the time. There's the halberd, which has great reach, probably one of the best of the melee weapons, and sort of bridges the gap between the 1- and 2-handed swords. You also have a hammer, which I sadly didn't get a chance to test out, and you also have a rifle, complete with a bayonet at the end if you want to engage at a much longer range. You'll obviously earn multiple weapons within these categories as you progress, but those 5 will form the basis of your weapon choices. Then finally, in at number 5, and let's be honest, this is a pretty important point right here, you can create your own character. Sadly, the build that I played didn't have character creation present, but I've linked a video down below from IGN as part of their IGN First coverage, which gives you a quick look at some of the customization options. This actually came as a bit of a surprise to me, since all the promotional material that I've seen from this game typically uses the same male character model. So I kind of went into this assuming that he was just the main character. But no, you can play as both male and female characters, and you have an array of customization options available to you. I'm just praying that they have beards. But either way, for the time being, that is pretty much it. That was a look at Code Vein launching next year for PS4 and Xbox One. No specific date yet, but it is slated for 2018. It's definitely a game that I am super looking forward to, and as and when I get a chance to go hands-on with it further, then you can expect to see more on the channel. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.